Commander Choi Min floated in zero gravity aboard the stealth ship Shadow of Earth, watching classified files stream across her holographic display. The bridge was dark except for the blue glow of the data screens her crew moved silently through, the ship checking weapon systems and navigation computers. They had been waiting for this moment for 5 years. The files told a story that would shock the galaxy if anyone else could see them. Human intelligence agents had been infiltrating alien civilizations for 20 years. They had learned every major language studied, every important technology, mapped every critical target. They had posed as traders, diplomats, scientists, and refugees. All the while they had been gathering information, the Vorthans believed humans were a young species stumbling around space with primitive ships and basic weapons. They thought human technology was centuries behind their own. They never suspected that human engineers had been secretly studying captured alien equipment for decades. Every crashed ship, every abandoned facility, every piece of technology left behind had been carefully examined. Dr. Song Yu worked without sleep in the hidden research complex beneath the lunar surface. Her laboratory was buried 3 kilometers underground, protected by layers of rock and metal. The facility did not appear on any official records. It had been built in secret, using resources diverted from civilian projects. Her team of scientists had been declared dead in various accidents over the years. The breakthrough had come 18 months ago when they finally cracked the mathematics behind Vorthan's shield technology. The aliens used quantum field manipulation to deflect energy weapons and projectiles, but they had made one critical error in their design. The shields operated on fixed frequencies that could be disrupted if you knew the right harmonic patterns. Song Yu held up a small device that looked like a simple metal rod. It was actually a quantum disruptor capable of punching through any known alien defense system. The beauty of the design was its simplicity. It could be manufactured using materials found in any star system. The complex mathematics were hidden in quantum processors. No larger than a grain of sand, Captain Beijun guided his modified freighter through the outer rim territories where human colonies struggled to survive on harsh worlds. The ship looked like any other cargo hauler, but its holds contained packages. That would change everything. Each box was sealed with quantum locks that would only open when they received the proper activation signal. The colonies looked defenseless from space. Small settlements scattered across hostile planets with minimal defenses and old equipment. The Vorthans had ignored them because they seemed too weak to pose any threat. That was exactly what humanity wanted them to think. These were not refugees hiding in fear. They were military assets positioned throughout the galaxy. Every human settlement had volunteers who had trained in secret. They knew how to assemble advanced weapons from basic components. They could build communication arrays from scrap metal. They had memorized the locations of every alien facility within 50 light years. Most importantly, they were ready to die for their species. Dr. Kim Tae stood in the war room deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, studying the holographic map that filled the entire chamber. Red dots marked Vorthan military, installation supply depots, communication hubs, and command centers. Blue dots showed the positions of human assets, both military and civilian. The map revealed the true scope of human preparation. 3,000 ships running silent, scattered throughout the galaxy, each one carefully positioned to strike at critical targets when the signal came. Some were disguised as cargo vessels, others as research ships. Many were completely invisible to alien sensors. They had been moving into position for months, waiting for this moment. The Vorthans had made their empire by conquering weaker species through superior firepower. They followed predictable patterns, massing their fleets at strategic points and overwhelming enemies with brute force. Their tactics had not changed in centuries because they had always worked against technologically inferior opponents. Humanity had studied those tactics carefully and prepared accordingly. The aliens expected massive fleet battles in open space. They would instead face attacks from unexpected directions using weapons they had never seen before, delivered by ships they could not detect. The war would not be fought according to Vorthan rules. General Park Soo reviewed the final attack plans with his staff. The first wave would target communication networks to prevent coordinated responses. The second wave would eliminate key production facilities to stop reinforcements. The third wave would strike at command structures to create confusion and panic. Every Target had been carefully selected for maximum psychological impact. Lieutenant Colonel O'Bin monitored alien communications from her hidden base in the asteroid belt. The facility was built inside a hollowed-out rock that drifted with thousands of others in the debris field. Her equipment could intercept and decode every message sent within 100 light-years. The aliens had no idea they were being watched. The Vorthan fleet movements showed their confidence. They were massing ships for what they expected to be a simple extermination mission. Their admirals were already planning victory celebrations. They had sent messages to other alien species inviting them to watch the destruction of humanity as a warning. What the Vorthans did not know was that every message they sent was being recorded and analyzed. Human cryptographers had broken their military codes years ago. Every battle plan, every troop movement, every strategic decision was known before it was implemented. The aliens were fighting an enemy who could predict their every move. Commander Li Yu activated the quantum phase generators on her stealth corvette. The ship seemed to flicker and fade, becoming transparent as it shifted partially out of normal space-time. The technology was humanity's greatest secret, a breakthrough in quantum mechanics that allowed true invisibility. Ships using quantum phasing could not be detected by any known sensor system. The development had taken 15 years and cost the lives of dozens of test pilots. But now humanity had fleets of ghost ships that could appear anywhere without warning. The Vorthans would be fighting an enemy they could not see until it was too late to defend themselves. Captain Yang Ho made final checks. On his converted mining ship, the vessel looked like civilian equipment, but its cargo holds contained enough antimatter to vaporize a capital ship. He was one of hundreds of volunteers who had accepted suicide missions. Their ships would appear to be harmless until the moment they delivered their deadly payloads. The psychology was as important as the weapons. The Vorthans expected humans to fight like other species had massed fleets in formal battles, following accepted rules of warfare. Instead, they would face tactics that violated every assumption about civilized conflict. Humans had learned that when facing extinction, all rules became meaningless. President Yunda gave the final authorization codes from his command bunker. The encrypted signals would be transmitted simultaneously to every human military unit in the galaxy. Operation Thunderclap would begin exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum as promised. But it would not be the surrender the aliens expected. The galaxy was about to learn why humans were the only species to evolve from apex predators on their homeworld. Every other intelligent race had developed from prey animals or peaceful herbivores. They understood cooperation and submission, but not the focused violence that came from millions of years of hunting and being hunted. Humanity had spent decades appearing harmless while secretly preparing for this war. They had played the role of naive newcomers exploring space with wonder and curiosity. All the while they had been studying their enemies and developing weapons that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The sleeping giant was finally awakening. Admiral Li Kyung stared at the empty chairs where the alien delegates had been sitting just moments ago. The conference room felt cold now, like all the warmth had been sucked out with their departure. 3 months of careful talks, 3 months of trying to find peace, 3 months of hoping that maybe, just maybe, they could stop the killing. The Vorthan High Commander had been clear in his final words before leaving. Humanity would give up 30 star systems. They would send ships full of precious metals every year. They would accept being treated as lesser beings in the galaxy. Forever Ambassador Park Hana sat across from Li Kyung, her hands shaking slightly. She had spent years learning the alien languages, studying their customs, trying to understand how they thought. She believed that all intelligent beings could find common ground if they just talked long enough. She was wrong. The holographic display still showed the list of human colonies that the Vorthans had destroyed. 12 worlds turned to glass, millions of people dead. Their crime had been simple. They were human. The Vorthans saw humans as weak creatures who had no right to claim territory in space. They attacked without warning and left nothing behind but melted rock. Dr. Kim Tae walked into the room carrying a datapad filled with his research. He had studied every aspect of Vorthan behavior for the past 5 years. He knew how they communicated, how they made decisions, how their society worked. Thought this knowledge would help create peace. Instead, it had shown him a terrible truth. The Vorthans did not want peace. They wanted submission. The neutral space station orbited a distant planet far from any military bases. It was supposed to be a safe place where different species could meet and talk. The walls were white and clean. The air was filtered to work for all the different alien biologies present. Everything was designed to make everyone feel comfortable and safe, but safety was an illusion. Lee Kyung received an encrypted message on his personal communicator. The words were simple, but they changed everything. The 72-hour ultimatum had begun. If humanity did not accept the Vorthan terms completely, they would face total destruction. Every human world would burn. Every human ship would be destroyed. The species would be wiped out completely. Park. Hana looked at the message and felt something break inside her. She had believed in diplomacy and the power of words. To solve problems, her parents had died when New Sol was attacked, but she still tried to find peace. She offered the Vorthans fair terms, equal treatment, shared technology, mutual respect. They laughed at her. The Vorthan High Commander had mandibles. That clicked when he spoke. His compound eyes showed no emotion as he rejected every human proposal. He spoke like humans were insects to be stepped on. His final words echoed in the empty room. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender or die. Kim Tae set down his datapad and looked at his colleagues. These were good people who wanted to prevent war. They had worked tirelessly to understand their enemies. They had offered everything they could think of to avoid more death. None of it mattered. The Vorthans had made their choice long ago. Back on Earth, President Yoon Da sat in his underground command center. The message from the peace talks arrived exactly as he expected it would. The talks had failed. The ultimatum had been delivered. Humanity now faced extinction or slavery. He looked around the room at his advisors and military leaders. Their faces showed no surprise. They had been preparing for this moment. The emergency meeting of the Global Defense Council lasted 12 minutes. Every representative from every human world voted the same way. They had tried peace. They had offered compromise. They had extended every possible olive branch. The aliens had rejected everything. Now they would see what humans were really capable of. General Park Soo activated the hidden communication networks that connected every human military unit in the galaxy. The sleeper agents who had been placed in alien territories years ago. The stealth ships that had been mapping enemy positions. The secret research facilities that had been developing new weapons. All of them received the same message. Operation Thunderclap was now active. Admiral Lee Kyung smiled as he read his new orders. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been pretending to be prey for far too long. The Vorthans thought humans were weak because they offered peace. They thought humans were stupid because they tried to negotiate. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The space station had recording devices in every room. The aliens had been watching the human delegation, hoping to gather intelligence about human weaknesses. What they recorded instead would be broadcast across the galaxy. The moment when humanity stopped pretending to be harmless, Commander Choi Min prepared her stealth ship for departure. The shadow of Earth had been drifting near the station, pretending to be space debris. Her crew had been listening to every conversation, recording every detail about Vorthan military plans. The aliens never knew they were being watched. Park. Hana packed her belongings slowly. Her diplomatic career was over. Peace talks would not save humanity now, but maybe what came next would ensure that no other species would face what humans had endured. Maybe the galaxy needed to learn that there were consequences for genocide. The Vorthan ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying their ultimatum back to their empire. They expected humanity to spend the next 72 hours in panic, evacuating worlds, begging for mercy, preparing for defeat. They could not have been more wrong. Dr. Song Yu received her activation codes in the hidden laboratory beneath the moon. Her team had been working on quantum disruptor technology. For years they had finally learned how to penetrate Vorthan shields. The weapons were ready. The manufacturing facilities were prepared. Now they just needed targets. Captain Beijun piloted his cargo ship away from the station. His holds were not filled with trade goods. They contained encrypted packages that would be delivered to human colonies across the galaxy. Each package held everything needed to turn civilian settlements into military bases. The scattered human populations were not helpless refugees. They were an army waiting for orders. The galaxy thought it knew humanity, the young species that explored space with wonder, the peaceful traders who shared their art and culture, the naive diplomats who believed all problems could be solved with words. They were about to meet the other side of human nature, the side that had climbed to the top of Earth food chain by being better predators than anything else on the planet. Li Qiang looked one last time at the conference room, where peace had died. He thought about all the humans who would never see their families again because of Vorthon aggression. He thought about the children who had been vaporized when their worlds burned. He thought about the future that could have been if the aliens had chosen differently. Then he walked to his ship to begin the war that would reshape the galaxy. The countdown had begun. 72 hours until the ultimatum expired. 72 hours until humanity showed the universe what happened when you pushed the wrong species too far. The Vorthons wanted to see human nature. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. News of the Sol System massacre spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by quantum communication networks, that the Vorthons never realized humans had been monitoring for decades. Ambassador Kang So sat in the Galactic Council, chambers on Nexus Prime, watching alien delegates whisper frantically as reports flooded in from every corner of space. The impossible was happening everywhere at once. Vorthon mining colonies in the Arcturus sector had stopped transmitting there. Naval shipyards orbiting Proxima had been found as expanding debris clouds. Most shocking of all, their heavily fortified capital system was under siege by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. The other species in the council had thought they understood the situation. A young, aggressive race called humanity was about to be eliminated by the established Vorthon Empire. The war would be brief and decisive, serving as a warning to other upstart civilizations. Now they watched in terror as the established order crumbled. Commander Li Yu activated her quantum cloaking system as Vorthon patrol ships passed just 3 kilometers from her stealth corvette Invisible Wolf. The alien vessels were running sensor sweeps, trying desperately to locate the human ships that were systematically destroying their infrastructure. She might as well have been a ghost. Human engineers had finally perfected true invisibility by studying the quantum signatures of dark matter itself. Their ships could phase partially out of normal space-time, becoming undetectable to any known sensor system. While aliens relied on detecting energy emissions, human vessels could exist between dimensions. The Vorthon patrol ships moved past her position completely, unaware that death was floating beside them. Li Yu waited until they were perfectly aligned, then fired a spread of quantum disruptor torpedoes. The alien ships exploded before their crews even knew they were under attack. On the planet Vorthos Prime, High Counselor Mektor stared through the reinforced windows of his bunker as human drop pods began falling from orbit like burning stars. The planetary defense grid that had protected the Vorthon homeworld for 1,000 years was failing sector by sector. The orbital shields flickered and died as quantum viruses corrupted their control systems. Human hackers had been quietly installing malicious code for years, waiting for the activation signal. The defenses that the Vorthons believed were impenetrable turned out to be compromised from the inside. Captain Park Jun led his assault team through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. His soldiers moved like shadows, using portable cloaking devices to remain invisible. The Vorthons had never developed tactics for fighting an enemy they could not see. Their defensive positions were useless. The human broadcasts began at the same moment the shields failed. Perfect Vorthon language speeches delivered directly to civilian populations, offering terms for surrender. The aliens were shocked to hear their own dialect spoken flawlessly by the species they had considered primitive. Dr. Limbo studied psychological profiles of Vorthon leadership from his mobile command center hidden in the asteroid belt surrounding the enemy. Homeworld humans had learned that the insectoid species operated on rigid hierarchies, where any sign of weakness meant death or exile from the group. The strategy was calculated to exploit this weakness. By destroying military assets while offering mercy to civilians, humanity was creating cracks in Vorthon society. Lower caste workers began questioning their superiors for the first time in centuries. Why had their leaders provoked a war with such A dangerous enemy commander, Choi Min, phased her stealth ship back into normal space, just long enough to launch another attack against a Vorthon supply convoy. The quantum torpedoes found their targets with perfect accuracy, then her ship vanished, again before the escorts could respond. The aliens were fighting an enemy made of shadows. The hegemony of Tau Ceti held emergency sessions as their military advisors presented revised threat assessments. 12 allied species had been planning their own attacks on human colonies, hoping to claim territory, while humanity was distracted by the Vorthon War. Now they realized they had completely misunderstood the situation. General Kim Sa coordinated the Galactic offensive from his command ship, Incheon Revenge. The mobile base was protected by the same quantum cloaking technology that made individual ships invisible, allowing it to operate deep in enemy space. His staff monitored attacks across dozens of star systems. Every strike was carefully planned to maximize psychological impact while minimizing civilian casualties. The goal was not genocide, but demonstration. Humanity wanted the galaxy to understand that threatening human lives would result in swift and overwhelming retaliation. Altarian delegation watched in horror as reports arrived from their border systems. Human ships had appeared without warning, destroyed Vorthon bases, then disappeared again. The precision was terrifying. Every target was military. Every strike was perfectly executed. There were no accidents or collateral damage. Captain Wu Ha piloted her reconnaissance ship through the ruins of Vorthon Industrial Complex. 7 documenting the aftermath for historical records. The destruction was surgical. Each facility had been targeted to cripple war production while leaving civilian structures untouched. The message was clear: humans could destroy anything they chose to destroy. The fact that they were showing restraint was more frightening than if they had simply annihilated everything. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity operated by rules other species had never encountered. Senator Ro A addressed the emergency council session from her position in the human diplomatic section. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the panic visible among other delegates. She spoke in measured tones about humanity, desire for peace, while reports of Vorthon defeats continued streaming in. The contradiction was deliberate. Humans could wage perfect war but preferred not to. They could destroy entire civilizations but chose mercy instead. The other species were learning that humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons, but their restraint in using them. Deep in Vorthon, Space Admiral Lee Kyung commanded the final assault on their military academy. The ancient institution had trained Vorthon officers for 3,000 years. Its destruction would be both practical and symbolic. The end of their military tradition is ships appeared around the academy complex like materializing nightmares, quantum-cloaked vessels that had been invisible until the moment they opened fire. The Vorthon cadets had been trained to fight conventional battles, not supernatural enemies, who struck from empty space. The academy shields collapsed under quantum disruptor fire. The buildings burned as human troops secured the facility, but instead of executing the survivors, they offered medical treatment and safe passage home. Another calculated mercy that would spread fear throughout the empire. 3 weeks after the peace talks collapsed, the Vorthon Empire existed only in history books. Their fleets were scattered, their worlds were occupied, their government was in hiding. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was begging for ceasefire negotiations. The galactic communication networks carried the same message over and over. Humanity had demonstrated the ability to destroy any target anywhere in the galaxy. The young species that everyone had underestimated was now the dominant military power in known space. Other civilizations began sending diplomatic missions to Earth, hoping to avoid becoming the next target species that had ignored humanity. For decades, suddenly wanted trade agreements and defense pacts. The balance of power had shifted overnight. But the most important message was not sent through official channels. It spread through rumor and whispered conversation in spaceports across the galaxy. Humanity had rules. Simple ones: treat them with respect and they would be the best allies anyone could ask for. But threaten their people and discover what apex predators could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be harmless. The storm that began in the Sol system was reshaping the entire galaxy, and it was far from over. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation, had been called by the Altarian ambassador, whose blue skin had turned pale with shock as reports continued flooding in from across known space. In just 6 days, humanity had effectively ended the Vorthan Empire as a functioning galactic power. The species that had terrorized the Outer Rim for centuries was now hiding in bunkers begging for mercy. Senator Roe A. represented humanity at the council meeting, her calm presence creating an island of stability in a sea of alien panic. Around her, delegates from dozens of species whispered frantically in their native languages, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly. The elephant in the room was obvious to everyone. If humans could dismantle the Vorthans this efficiently, what did that mean for every other civilization in the galaxy? The Vorthans had possessed the most advanced military technology known to science. Their ships had shields that could deflect any weapon. Their fleets had conquered dozens of worlds without suffering a single defeat. Their empire had seemed unshakable just 1 week ago. Now their homeworld was occupied by human forces. Their fleets were scattered wreckage drifting through space. Their government had collapsed when the military hierarchy broke down under the psychological pressure of fighting an impossible war. The hegemony of Tau Ceti requested an immediate recess to consult with their military advisors. 12 allied species that had been planning coordinated attacks on human colonies while Earth was distracted now found themselves desperately trying to hide any evidence of their intentions. Ambassador Veltar of the Centauri Coalition stood to address the assembly, his tentacles trembling with barely controlled fear. His people had provided intelligence support to the Vorthans, believing that helping eliminate humanity would result in favorable trade agreements. Now they faced the prospect of human retaliation. General Kimsa monitored the council proceedings from his command ship, while simultaneously coordinating mop-up operations across former Vorthan territory. The mobile base remained cloaked in quantum invisibility, allowing it to operate anywhere without detection. His staff tracked every alien military movement in real time. The demonstration was not yet complete. Every action humanity took was being broadcast across the galaxy through hijacked communication networks. The other species needed to see exactly what happened to civilizations that threatened human lives. The lesson had to be unmistakable. Captain Li Min piloted her stealth corvette through the ruins of Vorthan Fleet Command Station. The massive facility had been the nerve center of their military operations for over 2 centuries. Now it was a twisted mass of metal drifting in the vacuum of space. Her ship scanners detected no signs of life. The quantum disruptor weapons had penetrated every defensive system the aliens possessed. The destruction was so complete that forensic investigators would never be able to determine exactly what had happened. The Vorthans' most secure installation had simply ceased to exist. Dr. Song Yu reviewed battle damage reports from her laboratory. Beneath the lunar surface, the quantum weapons her team had developed were performing beyond their original specifications. Vorthan shields that had been considered impenetrable were collapsing within seconds of being targeted. More importantly, the psychological impact was exactly what they had hoped for. Vorthan military commanders were surrendering rather than face human attacks. Their rigid hierarchy was breaking down as lower-ranking officers refused orders from superiors who had led them into an unwinnable war commander. Choi Min received new target coordinates as her stealth ship completed another successful strike. The Vorthan research facility she had just destroyed contained their most advanced technology development programs. Years of alien scientific progress had been erased in minutes. The pattern was being repeated across dozens of star systems. Human forces appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, then vanished before any response was possible. The Vorthans were learning that their enemies could attack anywhere at any time with absolute impunity. President Yoon Da addressed the human population from his underground command center. His words were broadcast to every human colony and settlement in the galaxy. The message was simple and direct. The species that had tried to exterminate humanity was being systematically dismantled, but he also emphasized the restraint humanity was showing. Civilian populations were being protected. Food supplies were being maintained. Medical aid was being provided to Vorthan wounded. Humans were proving that they could wage perfect war while maintaining their moral principles. The other galactic civilizations were taking notes. Every detail of human military capabilities was being analyzed and recorded. The young species had revealed technology that made existing defensive systems obsolete. Their tactics violated every assumption about how space warfare was supposed to work. Ambassador Park Hana monitored alien diplomatic communications from her position at the Federation headquarters. The conversation she intercepted revealed the true scope of the panic spreading through galactic civilization species that had never had contact with humans were requesting information about human intentions. The Rigelian Empire had placed their border fleets on high alert, despite being hundreds of light years from human space. The Procyon Trade Federation was desperately trying to establish diplomatic contact with Earth. The Canopus Republic had begun evacuating their outer colonies as a precautionary measure. Captain Wu Ha completed another reconnaissance mission, documenting the precision of human strikes for the historical record. Every attack had been planned to minimize casualties while maximizing strategic impact. The Vorthons were being defeated, not through brutality, but through superior planning and execution. The galaxy was learning that humanity operated by a simple code. Peaceful coexistence was preferable to war, but when forced to fight, humans would demonstrate why they had evolved from apex predators. Every other intelligent species had developed from prey animals or peaceful herbivores. Lieutenant Colonel Obin intercepted communications from the surviving Vorthon government officials who were frantically trying to arrange surrender negotiations. Their messages revealed complete psychological collapse. The species that had considered itself genetically superior was begging for mercy from the humans they had tried to exterminate. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity had offered genuine peace talks and been rejected with contempt. Now the positions were reversed, and humans held all the advantages. The Vorthons, who had demanded submission, were learning what it felt like to be powerless. General Park Su reviewed the casualty reports with satisfaction. Human losses were minimal thanks to superior technology and tactics. The quantum cloaking systems had made their ships nearly invulnerable, while quantum disruptor weapons had neutralized every Vorthon defensive advantage. More importantly, human restraint was being noted by neutral observers. Medical supplies were being sent to Vorthon civilians' prison. Camps for captured military personnel met galactic humanitarian standards. Humans were proving they could wage war without becoming monsters. The Galactic Federation session reconvened with several species requesting private meetings with the human delegation. Fear and respect had replaced the condescending attitudes that humanity had faced for decades. The young species was no longer being dismissed as primitive or insignificant. Senator Ro Ie accepted the meeting requests with diplomatic politeness, but made it clear that any future discussions would be conducted as negotiations between equals. The days of humanity, accepting second-class status in galactic affairs, were permanently over. The final reports arrived as the council session. Continued Vorthon military resistance had completely collapsed. Their surviving commanders were competing with each other to surrender, first hoping for better treatment from their human conquerors. The Vorthon battle fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, like a swarm of metal insects blotting out the stars. High Commander Zeth Kor stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the scanner displays show empty space where he expected to see panicking human ships fleeing toward their homeworld. 200 warships had come to deliver the final lesson to humanity. The fleet was massive enough to reduce any planet to molten glass. Each ship carried weapons that could crack continents and shields that had never been penetrated by enemy fire. The Vorthons had brought more firepower than they needed, because they wanted the destruction of Earth to be visible from neighboring star systems. Zeth Kor transmitted the formal demand for surrender across all frequencies using the ancient ritual words that had preceded the destruction of dozens of worlds. Humanity had exactly 1 hour to broadcast their unconditional submission or face complete annihilation. Expected terror and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, he received only silence. Lieutenant Colonel Obin watched the alien fleet from her concealed position in the asteroid belt. Her hidden facility was built inside what appeared to be just another chunk of rock drifting with thousands of others in the debris field. The Vorthons had no idea they were being observed by sensors more advanced than anything in their empire. The enemy formation was perfect for what was coming next. The ships were clustered together for mutual protection, their overlapping shields creating a defensive barrier that no conventional weapon could penetrate. But the Vorthons had never faced unconventional weapons before. Obin checked the countdown timer on her display, 14 minutes until Operation Thunderclap reached its first phase. She looked around at her crew of volunteers who had accepted that they might not survive the next hour. Each person had lost family members to Vorthon attacks. Each one was ready to die for revenge at precisely 14:30 Universal Time. She transmitted a single word across encrypted channels. Thunder across the solar system. Asteroids that had been drifting peacefully for months suddenly blazed to life with hidden engines. Hundreds of chunks of rock that seemed natural began accelerating toward the Vorthon fleet. Each asteroid contained a human pilot and enough antimatter to vaporize a capital ship. The rocks moved slowly at first, building speed gradually so they would appear to be natural debris knocked loose by gravitational forces. By the time the Vorthons realized what was happening, the asteroids would be moving too fast to stop. Captain Yang Ho gripped the controls of his converted mining ship as warning. Alarms began to sound inside the hollowed-out asteroid that concealed his vessel. The rocky shell around him was 3 meters thick, making his ship invisible to enemy sensors until the moment he chose to reveal himself. His daughter Minju had been 8 years old when the Vorthons attacked New Busan. The colony shields had failed within minutes, and the orbital bombardment had turned the entire planet into a sea of lava. Yang Ho had been off-world when it happened. He never got to say goodbye. Now, he watched the Vorthon flagship grow larger on his display. The massive alien vessel was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Its shields glowed with energy that could deflect any known projectile. But the aliens had never encountered kamikaze tactics before. The Vorthon point defense systems came online as scanner operators finally noticed the incoming asteroids. Laser batteries and missile launchers began firing at what appeared to be natural debris knocked loose by the fleet arrival. The aliens were not yet worried because rocks posed no threat to their advanced ships. Commander Zeth Kor watched the defensive fire with satisfaction. The humans were apparently so desperate they were throwing rocks at his fleet. Perhaps they hoped to damage his ships with primitive kinetic weapons. It was almost pathetic enough to make him feel sorry for them. Then the first asteroid disintegrated under defensive fire and revealed the armed human ship. Hidden inside, Yang Ho felt his mining vessel shake as the rocky shell exploded around him. His ship was now exposed to enemy fire, but he was less than 10 kilometers from the Vorthon flagship. His antimatter payload was armed and ready. The alien point defenses swiveled toward him, but they were too late. He thought about Minju as he triggered the detonation. The antimatter explosion lit up space like a new star for exactly 3 seconds. The Vorthon flagship simply ceased to exist, along with Yang Ho and his mining ship. The shockwave from the blast damaged nearby vessels and sent fragments of twisted metal spinning through the fleet formation. Across the solar system, more asteroids were revealing their hidden cargo. Commander Li Yu emerged from her rocky shell in a sleek stealth corvette that immediately activated quantum cloaking. Captain Wu Ha broke free from his asteroid in a modified destroyer loaded with quantum disruptor weapons. Each pilot had trained for years for this single moment. The Vorthon fleet formation dissolved into chaos as ship after ship fell victim to the asteroid attacks. Their perfect defensive line became a scattered mass of vessels trying to avoid collision with debris while firing wildly at targets they could barely see. High Commander Zeth Kor found himself in command of a fleet that was dying around him. His flagship was gone. His formations were broken, and his enemies were using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. Dr. Songyu monitored the battle from her lunar laboratory, watching as her quantum disruptor weapons punched through alien shields like they were made of paper. The Vorthons had relied on their defensive technology for so long they had forgotten how to fight without it. Now their ships were naked and vulnerable. Commander Choi Min piloted the Shadow of Earth through the battle zone using quantum phasing to remain invisible. Her ship appeared long enough to fire a spread of quantum torpedoes, then vanished again before the aliens could target her. The Vorthons were fighting ghosts that struck without warning and disappeared instantly. The psychological impact was as Devastating as the physical damage, Vorthan military doctrine was based on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority. They had never faced an enemy that used stealth suicide attacks and weapons that ignored their defenses. Their crews began to panic. Captain Beijun watched the battle from his position near Jupiter, where he was delivering the last of his special cargo packages to human colonies. The settlers were already beginning to assemble the weapons and equipment he had brought. The outer system colonies would soon become military bases. The Vorthan survivors tried to retreat, but found their escape routes blocked by more human ships that seemed to materialize from empty space. Quantum-cloaked vessels appeared on all sides, launching attacks with weapons the aliens had never seen before. The hunters had become the hunted in. 30 minutes, the mighty Vorthan armada was reduced to burning wreckage drifting through the outer solar system. Less than a dozen alien ships escaped the slaughter. Their proud fleet that had been meant to demonstrate Vorthan power instead became proof of human capabilities. High Commander Zeth Kor survived long enough to record one final transmission from his crippled command ship. He sent a desperate warning to his homeworld, telling them that humans were not the primitive species they appeared to be. His ship exploded before he could finish the message. The survivors who limped back to Vorthan space carried stories that seemed impossible. Humans had used weapons that penetrated their shields, tactics that defied military logic, and technology that made their ships invisible. The young species was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. But by then, it was already too late for the Vorthan Empire to change course. The war they had started was spreading across the galaxy, and humanity was no longer pretending to be harmless. The sleeping giant had awakened, and its first taste of blood had only made it hungrier.